When I was a kid, I had a favorite Bible story from the Hebrew scriptures, from the book of Genesis, to be more precise. I absolutely loved the story of the Tower of Babel. My Jewish bubby would read it to me over and over again. When I finally learned to read myself, I'd be so excited when I got to chapter 3 in the little children's Bible storybook, because that was where the Tower of Babel story was. Now that many years have passed, it's a little difficult to remember why I enjoyed this story so much. Perhaps it was the idea that these people built this enormous tower into the sky, which was so cool. Perhaps it was because my bubby had a knack for embellishing any story, so it would be sure to include the very important zebras, tigers, and elephants. Or perhaps it was for what happened to the people in the story, because they built this enormous tower into the sky. As the story goes, all humanity spoke the same language, and they formed one large tribal community. This tribe settled not far from the Euphrates River in the land of Shinar. It was there that they built a city called Babel, and also built a tall tower. This tower was built, it was said, of such material as a great river basin would afford, and the genius of humankind could manufacture. This was all done in order to create a great meeting place, but also to prevent the people from leaving the city, scattering about and losing their tribal identity. Yahweh came down from above to investigate what exactly the tribe was doing. What Yahweh witnessed were people overly self-confident and entirely too self-possessed. They displayed a religious-like passion over the tower that caused Yahweh to be fearful of what would become of the people. In order to stop them, their language was confounded. Suddenly, people were speaking different languages, and groups who were once friends and relations could no longer understand one another. A great fear settled in, and as a result, bands of similar speakers scattered out of the city of Babel and into the world, abandoning the tower. Well, interesting story for the 6-year-old me to latch onto, but wait, there's more. There's another version of this story that also dates back to the time of the Hebrew scriptures. Now, we've all heard the story of Noah and the flood, and this great flood was sent upon the earth as the divine judgment of God because the people had become evil and had abandoned their faith. Life became unbearable. According to the story, God gave humankind another chance by saving Noah and his family, who had not abandoned their faith, along with 2 of every animal. Now, long after the flood had gone and life on earth had restored itself, Noah, it was discovered, had had a very talented but not so good great-grandson named Nimrod, who rebelled against God. Jewish history does indicate that Nimrod was a political tyrant who commanded all his people to rebel against God and the Jewish faith. And he took a position of a lead priest in a form of occult worship. It is also said that when his father died, Nimrod married his own mother, although this really can't be proven except through story. Some rabbinical literature states that at this time, the people believed so strongly that God had no right to keep all the heavens for himself and leave only the earth for them. They followed Nimrod into rebellion. Now, during his leadership, Nimrod built many major cities, including Babel, Ashur, Nineveh, and Calah. These were not, to put it simply, nice places to live. Some of the most unimaginable things occurred in these cities. And after his death, the religion Nimrod created and figured prominently in was continued by his wife, who could also have possibly been his mother. She deified Nimrod, calling him a sun god. Various cultures called him Baal, the great life giver, or the god of fire. Some time passed, and Nimrod's wife gave birth to an illegitimate son, whom she called Tammuz. She claimed that Tammuz was Nimrod reborn. This woman was called by many names, one of which was Isatar, or as it was sometimes pronounced, Easter. Isatar not only said that Tammuz was Nimrod reborn, but also claimed that she herself was born of supernatural events, having hatched from a very large egg. She said that her son was conceived supernaturally and that he was the savior of the people. Isatar and her child became objects of worship. The deceased Nimrod became the father of creation. Isatar became the goddess of fertility, and Tammuz became the son of Baal, or the son of God. As a child, it is said that Tammuz was particularly fond of rabbits, and they too became a symbol of worship and fertility. In the old fables of this time, the so-called savior Tammuz was worshipped along with the various rites of spring. According to legend, he was killed by a wild boar and went into the underworld. Through the weeping of his mother, he was mystically revived each spring as the new growth sprang from the earth. A spring festival of worship for him began, one where the rituals and practices are a little too horrible to speak about. It was around this time that a great tower was built at Babel that reached far into the sky in order to be close to heaven as possible. And a golden idol of Baal was placed at the top, holding up a sword as if to declare war against the heavens. The people used this tower to worship the sun god and the resurrection of his earthly son Tammuz each spring. The evil conquering the world in these stories nearly parallel the supposed time before the Great Flood, and it's here where the old legends meet the Hebrew scriptures. God, it was said, witnessed the actions of the people in Babel and Babylon and other places who worship this false religion, and he called their language to become confused. People suddenly could not understand one another, and thus disbanded and scattered around the world in different language groups. Credit is given to this as the reason for the thousands of languages spoken around the world, along with the end of the false religion. This story has been told and retold and altered to fit into just about any faith and religious belief. Just look at the similar Greek myth of Persephone. Persephone was the goddess of spring's bounty. Once she was playing in a meadow with some companions when she was seized by Hades and carried off into the underworld to be his wife. Her mother, Demeter, searched desperately for her throughout the world. When she learned that Zeus, Persephone's own father, had played a role in her kidnapping, Demeter was furious, causing winter to cover the earth and would not allow the plants and vegetation of the earth to regrow until Persephone was returned. But there were rules in Hades, and because Persephone had tasted the food of the underworld, she ate a handful of pomegranate seeds, she was forced to forever spend part of the year with her husband in the underworld, but could return to the surface of the earth each spring. Her return to Hades meant the halting of growth and a change of seasons, and the rebirth of spring with her return to earth. Now, just as stories are shared among cultures, so are the days set aside for celebration or religious observance. In the story of Tammuz, his mother Isatar proclaimed there be a 40-day period of sorrow every year prior to the anniversary of his death, during which time no meat was to be eaten. While worshipers meditated on Baal or Nimrod and Tammuz, they were to make a sign of a letter T in front of their hearts. They ate cakes with the marking of a T on top, or so the story goes. Every year, the first Saturday after the first full moon, after the spring equinox, was dedicated as a celebration of Tammuz and the sun god. In Jewish tradition, the celebration of Passover takes place at approximately the same time of year. The ancient Jewish people, as do modern Jews, follow the Persian or Babylonian calendar, which is a lunar calendar. There are 13 months rather than 12, and it follows the cycles of the moon, which is the reason why Jewish holidays are not celebrated on the same fixed day each year as on our modern solar calendar. However, Passover is usually celebrated near the time of the spring equinox. The story of Passover is from the book of Exodus. It tells how Moses was chosen by God to lead the Jews from slavery in Egypt. Moses had been raised as an Egyptian after the Pharaoh's daughter found him as an infant floating in a basket down the Nile. Fearing for his life, his true Jewish mother had let him go. Years later, it was revealed who Moses truly was, and though a little reluctant to lead, he raised a rebellion against the Pharaoh. At this time, God sent down 10 plagues upon Egypt, the last of which is where the holiday gets its name. The 10th plague states that the firstborn of every Egyptian family was to be killed by the angel of death. The Jewish people marked the doorways of their homes with animal blood so the angel of death would pass over their homes. And after a long chase ending at the Red Sea, the Jewish people fled Egypt together. And after 40 years of wandering the deserts, they finally arrived at their homeland, reborn as free people. And now around the globe, Jews honor that journey towards freedom during the week-long celebrations and rituals of Passover. Other ancient celebrations also occur at this time of year, such as the Roman celebration of Attis. Cybele, the Phrygian fertility goddess, had a fictional consort who, it was said, was born via a virgin birth. This was Attis, who was believed to have died and was resurrected each year near the time of the spring equinox. In a Phoenician myth, a Semitic goddess, Ashtart or Ashtoreth, was worshipped alongside Adonis, which in Greek translates to Lord. Adonis was killed by a wild boar while out hunting one day. He became the symbol of regrowth in nature each year. His loss was mourned, and each spring a festival was held to honor him and his resurrection. When Christianity was spreading across the ancient world, leaders of the religion looked to all these older celebrations, both Jewish and pagan, and claimed the time as their own. Replacing the names of Tammuz or Attis with Jesus was a way to take a celebration that was already familiar to the people in the hopes that it would turn them towards Christianity. This practice did work in many cases, and it's a little interesting and kind of funny, though, that modern scholars have discovered evidence that early Christians and the pagans used to argue bitterly over who had the true God and which one was an imitation. Well, I could go on telling old myths and stories all day, but where does all of this bring us? It brings us here to Easter. Easter is a holiday that very clearly honors its origins and embraces all the traditions I just spoke of. In our modern time, we have eggs we decorate, hide, and sometimes even roll across the lawn in competitive races. Pretty colored eggs are hidden by a magical rabbit, and we send the kids off to find them. Commercially, it has become yet another time of year when candy companies cash in by selling pastel-wrapped candy eggs, chicks, and bunnies made from marshmallow or chocolate or any other fun confection. It is a celebration of everything spring, when many give gratitude for all that has laid dormant over the winter and is re-emerging. Even though observance of this day is not directly mentioned in the Bible, for very religious Christians, the day of Easter is literally the day when Jesus was resurrected. While these fun and serious modern traditions all honor this holiday, there is still a greater point that needs to be made. If we look back on all the stories of Babel, Tammuz, and the hundreds of pagan rituals that sprung up over and over again throughout time, if we read the old legends and myths that seem to all share common elements, if we look to history and how political leaders ruled and their effect on the faith of their people, what is the common thread running through all this? Fear. Nimrod ruled by fear. The Romans conquered the world by fear. Ancient Greeks feared the wrath of their gods. Egypt ruled over the Jews with fear. The people of Babel feared one another when they could no longer understand one another. Humankind throughout millennia have feared the unknown, feared the other. Even now there is fear. Fear to hear the news because so much of it is bad. Fear of making wrong decisions. Death is feared. Change is feared. Others are feared. There is still that fear of others who speak a different language or have different traditions. What is missing from all of this is love. Love is one of the greatest human challenges, even to Unitarian Universalists. Some of the UU principles that serve as guides in our faith acknowledge the inherent worth and dignity of everyone. We seek justice, equality, and compassion for all people, and we accept and encourage one another no matter who we are or where we came from. We try to live these principles and values, but still, fear can be a monster, causing love and compassion to be our greatest challenge. Now, here in our church, we don't often discuss Jesus. Jesus is not revered as the Son of God in Unitarian Universalism. The teachings of Jesus are not the sole focal point of our faith. However, they are one of the many sources of spiritual inspiration we can turn to. According to the stories, Jesus was a leader and a teacher. He was an individual with ideas and thoughts about how he felt people ought to treat one another. When he was traveling across Judea, gathering followers who felt the same way he did, there were others becoming very afraid of this new radical who was talking nonsense. Jesus had some pretty far out there ideas that frankly scared the you-know-what out of some people, especially the Roman occupiers of Judea, who, out of fear, crucified him. But really, the lessons he taught about compassion and love should in no way scare anyone. Instead, they should inspire. One such lesson is from the Beatitudes, which comes from the Sermon on the Mount and can be found in the book of Matthew. Yet the language and poetry of them trace back to the book of Psalms in the Hebrew Scriptures. The Beatitudes are blessings. If spoken in Greek, the word blessed is defined as spiritual well-being and prosperity. It is a deep joy of the soul. Those who experience the first aspect of a beatitude, meaning those who are meek, poor, mournful, hungry for justice, among other things, will also experience the second aspect, which means that they will find comfort, be fulfilled, and have mercy. They will find spiritual well-being and prosperity. The words of the Beatitudes cause a shift in thinking, for it is not the most well-to-do people who are the richest and have the most to gain. I invite you now to just close your eyes as I read the Beatitudes to you. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, for they shall possess the land. Blessed are they who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are they that hunger and thirst after justice, for they shall have their fill. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the clean of heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they that suffer persecution for justice's sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. These 8 passages in our current 7 principles are rather similar. They are both ways to view life and each other in a fair and just manner, showing compassion towards all, regardless of where you are in the world. Across this earth, there are people that are seen as below others, less than human. For example, think about the homeless here in the Twin Cities. Unless the conversation happens, there's no way of guessing how they came to be where they are, and they are often unfairly judged. They receive scowls when they should get a smile. They are judged as having done something or are doing something wrong. They have every right to feel that there is no more hope, but still they go on day after day. It may seem hopeless, but there is hope. Think about your own life and what's important to you. What would you do if, in what feels like an instant, everything you know and everything you care about is gone, just gone? It may be sudden, or it may happen slowly, losing one thing after another. Imagine if the world you know was turned upside down and you suddenly find yourself going without a meal because you can't afford it. There may be days without food. As hard as you tried to keep up with the bills, imagine that you find yourself living on the street because your home was taken away. All the possessions you once cherished are gone. Imagine that you've lost your job and that things have become so desperate you find yourself begging on a street corner. What would you do? Would you give up hope? You may find that you are grateful for the smallest of things, Grateful to those who pass along $1 or $2 because that means you and your loved ones can eat something. Grateful for the warm local shelter you found because that means you can sleep on something other than cardboard and cement. Joy can be a hard thing to find, but you are grateful to those who give you a smile and greet you with a hello, because that means they don't care how you got there or where you are, just that you need to be lifted up again. They have seen you. Blessed are they who mourn, for they will be comforted. If this world was turned upside down and you found you have lost everything, how would you feel about those who ignore you, or harass you, or who simply pass you by? Would you feel anger towards them or compassion? As hard as it can be to think about, it is those who would pass us by that truly need the most compassion. There's gratitude for the material things we have in our lives, and there's gratitude for the compassion we can give to others. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. We believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Easter today is a celebration of resurrection and rebirth and of springtime. So however we celebrate it, today we are honoring a very long history of compassion. Whether we mark the day with joyous wonder and celebrate nature becoming new again, or with those Easter baskets, pretty colored eggs, candy, and all the cute little rabbits we can find, always remember what should really be reborn. In our faith, this is not a day that we just honor one man as divine, or just pray to a goddess, or just watch for Persephone to return, or just build great towers to the sky. It's a day when understanding one another, even though we may speak a different language, becomes divine. It is a day that even within the depths of despair, we have the glory of hope in our souls. It is a day that should see the ways of the world turned upside down. It's a day to honor the rebirth of compassion and love as we celebrate all life. Well, as we move into a time of discussion, I ask you to think about compassion and what you feel it takes to awaken to compassion. Does it start simply for you, or can there be a global awakening? If you'd like to share in person, please raise your hand and we can bring you the mic. And if you're at home, please write in the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to share. I don't see anyone here. Thank you.
When I see someone who isn't very compassionate, isn't very kind, is kind of nasty, I always wonder if they haven't found compassion for themselves, if they haven't found the best in themselves and their own significance and dignity.
Thank you. Anyone online who might like to share?
I'm not seeing any hands or comments at this point.
Amy would like to share.
What I'm thinking about for myself is, what am I going to do with that compassion? So, I may say, oh, I feel compassion, but often it's like, what does that mean? What difference does that make in my behavior? And I often don't see that. So I guess I'm thinking about that a lot. I heard on public radio, I think yesterday, and Aman say, we don't want to just be a people of feelings. And I think I'm kind of stuck there.
It's an interesting question.
We do have one comment. Polly has written, I think compassion comes from experience things and getting support from them, getting support through the experience.
Thank you, Polly. Thank you. As we carry on through our service, we're going to go into our closing hymn, which is number 61, Lo, the Earth Awakes Again. Just as earlier, our choir will be singing and leading the hymn, and feel free to stand as you're able and sing along here, and people at home will be muted and can sing along.